Hey, people. Thank you for tuning in to the October 2020 Dinner with the Devs LBE edition. I'm Dwayne, part of the marketing team for Schell Games. I have a stellar cast here, and I forgot to put my stuff on mute. There we go. Okay, so we have a stellar cast here of Jessie, Schell, our CEO, and with some stellar guests. So I will let all of them introduce themselves. But first, housekeeping. If you have any questions about location-based experiences, location-based entertainment, we're going to talk about both. We're going to talk about what those definitions are. The big question that I'm going to ask the panel is, what does LBE look like in a year, post-pandemic, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And I want to uh, you know, let them talk about what their experiences, what their activities are, and what they think how that's going to involve or evolve in the upcoming years. So please, any questions, comments, please put that in the live chat. We have a stellar support team. Mac, our web ops manager, is acting as our tech producer. So thank you, Mac, for making sure that this works and everybody's able to see it. We have Adam, our community marketing specialist, answering the live chat. So any questions that you have in the comments, he's going to make sure that that comes to our panelists. And then Allie, our marketing coordinator, she'll be putting the chapters together and making sure that all the questions and answers throughout the chat are properly documented towards the end of the week. So first and foremost, let's start with our panel introduction. So let's start with Brett, then Michael, then Jessie.
Great. Thanks so much, Dwayne. This is a lot of fun. Excited to be here. So yeah, my name is Brent Bushnell. I'm one of the founders of 2-Bit Circus. We're a big band of nerds that are, obsessed with entertainment, and we did a lot of public live entertainment for years. Ran our own carnival for a couple of years before finally settling down with what we call a micro amusement park. It's a 50,000 square foot entertainment complex in downtown Los Angeles. And then I also chair our foundation. We have a whole parallel nonprofit that uses games and play to get kids excited about science and engineering. And speaking of kids, I have a tiny little kid here I'll introduce who's going to be fussing about, but this is our new little son. So if you hear grunts, it's coming from him, probably.
Brent, that was an excellent introduction and a hard act to follow. Also, thank you, Dwayne. I'm Michael Festa. I am the Chief Business Officer of Springboard VR. Since 2017, we've been providing venue management and content licensing solutions for various types of virtual reality, arcades, FECs, any type of location-based entertainment that's utilizing VR in some capacity. Before I was here, I started off in Survios back in 2015, and since the early times of 2016, really started pioneering the shift of a lot of the major studios into the LBE scene. And I worked there on the content side, publishing 9 games in that period of time, and then at the beginning of this year, joined into Springboard. Again, where we've been kind of providing services for this whole entertainment sector, but also expanding into some of the enterprise side, like enterprise training, kind of workforce management, and also into education as well.
And before we get to Jessie, Mac, if you can, for those who don't know Springboard VR, it's probably not top of mind for consumers. So Mac, if you can play those first 30 seconds of the Springboard VR video to properly introduce them.
We use it at 2-Bit. We're big fans.
Nice.
Yep. Small world.
We always wanted to be a part of something that could change the world. And the first time we stepped into virtual reality, we thought, this is it. We started an arcade and quickly ran into problems. Manually loading games, tracking time with a stopwatch, it was embarrassing. We needed a solution, so we decided to build one. We launched a software company and built Springboard VR, a dedicated platform that runs your arcade and transforms your customer experience. With Springboard's arcade management software, setup is a breeze.
All right. So thank you for that, Mac. So now, Jessie.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Hey, I'm Jessie Schell, CEO of Schell Games. My intersection with location-based entertainment is a little more historical. Was my biggest one. Back in the day, I worked on Disney Quest, which was Disney's chain of location-based entertainment centers. Turns out it didn't end up being not that big a chain. They ended up building two of them, one in Florida, one in Chicago. And then they closed the Chicago one, but the Florida one stayed open for 20 years. That was where I really cut my teeth on understanding about the location-based entertainment space. But since then, Schell Games has done a lot of sort of museum work and theme park work that's been a little bit in that space. But it's certainly a space that we're fascinated with, and we've been glad to be able to have our VR titles on Springboard VR, which has been a great way for us to get into the LBE space.
Now, whenever we talk about LBE or location-based entertainment or location-based experiences, I want to ask for your definitions for both of those, or if those mean the same thing. But whenever we talk about location-based experiences, let's start with Jessie, and then we can go around the horn again. What exactly does that mean? And so for the consumer, what does that mean of location-based experiences? What are we trying to talk about?
Yeah, usually when we talk about location-based, we're talking about things that are definitely not an at-home experience. And so sometimes when people say location-based, they're talking very specifically about arcade-type spaces, but other times they're speaking more broadly about like everything from a bowling alley to a skating rink to an amusement park. But the main concept of location-based is it's an entertainment experience of some kind that requires that you're going to go out of the house to do it.
Cool. And feel free for anybody else to jump in.
Yeah, it's also interesting sort of dig in to say, hey, there's the category of LBE, all location-based entertainment, and then a given experience, is sort of one arc, one game, one story. So imagine you go to Disneyland and there's the haunted house, there's the railroad. Each one of those is a different experience inside of their sort of larger LBE offering. So something like your guys's I Expect You to Die would be one experience delivered over Springboard inside of a venue like 2-Bit.
I think Jessie and Brent summed it up pretty well.
Okay, yeah, so I like that. So just to summarize, so we have the overarching category of location-based entertainment, and then those similar or those tidbits would be experiences. So no, I like that. I think that definitely works.
And I gotta say, just to fan out for a second about Disney Quest, which was freaking amazing. I mean, this was like the size of a department store with so many different experiences. But literally in the 90s, you guys were doing virtual reality where you could program the course of your roller coaster, get into a pod in VR, experience that roller coaster. I mean, this was that. Jessie, I can only imagine how hard that was to do with then technology.
Oh, it was pretty crazy. It was yeah. I mean, we weren't using consumer hardware. We were using industrial computers and things, industrial simulators, industrial computers. The expense was crazy. Everything was really experimental. But it was super fun, and we really felt like we were way out on the cutting edge when we were doing that stuff.
Yeah, I can't imagine there was anybody you could look to be like, oh, well, how are they doing it? It's like you guys were just at the very tip of the spear.
Yeah, I mean, there were a small number of location-based places that were going. Virtual World was one of those. So there was a little bit, but it was very much highly experimental. I think we opened 97, something like that. I can't remember, 97, 98, something like that. So it was even the internet was still pretty fresh at that point. So it was early days.
That's very cool. So whenever we think about location-based entertainment, do you think that the definition of that is going to change post-pandemic?
I don't know if it's going to change. The definition rather, because I think you know, Jessie did a great job. It encompasses all the stuff, including the things we haven't thought of yet, right? Axe throwing to shuffleboard to whatever new weird Zorb thing we'll do with Zorbs. But you know, there's you know, so I think the place that I think is going to evolve is the concept of hybrid events, hybrid experiences, where you know, and this is something 2Bit's been thinking a lot about, is what happens if you can't come live, or particularly like when we go to throw a corporate event, you know, you know, as an event planner right now, you might feel guilty asking your people to come to something that didn't have a virtual offering, because, you know, some of your audience might be at risk. Some of your audience has now embraced remote work and doesn't even live in the same city, you know. And so I think the opportunity for, you know, physical stuff to bridge to digital stuff, you know, in a real way where it feels like a meaningful experience for the folks on either side, is some place that I think is going to get a lot of attention.
No, I would tend to agree. And I think, look, you know, the physical location-based entertainment, I don't think that definition is going to change particularly, but the very interesting one for me, you know, to give an example, is like the Travis Scott concert in Fortnite. Like, if you can now have a virtual location that everybody can kind of coalesce around, we can all be at together, we can all experience the same thing at the same time from very different places.
Totally.
It kind of opens up this like meta concept of a virtual location based entertainment versus a physical based. So it's certainly interesting to see how that's going to move forward.
Yeah, completely agree. And that Travis Scott concert, I went in Fortnite for that and was just loving it, you know. And I tried to grab my wife. I was like, "This is the future. Come check this out." And she was like, "I'm not interested."
it really struck me. It was one of the first moments where I you know, I got goosebumps and whatnot, but I really was in there. I said, man, this is going to be really different. Like, this is not all the kind of hype you hear about. Like, this is real. This is going to be a thing moving forward. And I was so excited for that.
You know, LA-based company, The Wave, has been doing a bunch of virtual concerts and just closed an additional huge round of capital, you know, and they've been hosting for all variety, electronica, you know, to you know, pop. And it's pretty incredible how quickly we're accelerating into the virtual.
Good stuff. And yeah, already we have a question. Okay, so Miss Maxima, thank you for asking your question. You're big on our Until You Fall Discord. I'm going to hold your question just a little bit further in. So, but let's dive in a little bit more about location-based entertainment, just to continue to fill a general foundation for everyone. What do you think is the draw to LBE, whether it's physical or virtual, as Michael and Brent that you brought out? So what's the draw to that versus just your general home gaming market? Well, why is that more? Well, is there a draw, and if there's a draw, why?
For sure. You know, I mean, you know, I'm obviously biased, but you know, the you know, the appeal of live is it's the highest resolution. Literally, full stop. Or, you know, I mean, your eyes are seeing the thing live. You know, your ears are hearing the thing live. You know, you are there, and not just the sights and the sounds, but you know, we are corporeal, and so you're going to meet people there. You're going to get the, you know, the subtle intonations in their voice, their hand gestures. You know, you're going to hear, you're going to you know, drink beer at the same time and taste that, and it's going to be a new flavor you maybe haven't tried before. You know, all of that sensory immersion we are trying, you know, we put a lot of time and effort into to recreate in the home, but it's always a facsimile. You know, the best version is live.
Cool.
Go ahead, Jessie.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, one of the things we always talk about, a phrase I like, the golden rule of location-based entertainment, is you've got to give them something they can't get at home. And I don't know whether that's a church or a bar or you know, 2-Bit Circus. It's you got to have something that they don't have at home in the house, and there's a lot of ways to do that, right? Sometimes it's through like cool computer hardware. Other times, I mean, it's part of the success of the bowling alley. Where I used to work with Joe Garlington at Disney, and he was a big proponent of the idea that the bowling alley was a a really important gold standard, because they're persistent. They don't go away. It's a location that people will go to because bowling is its own thing. You try and do bowling at home, and like just there's not good ways to do it. You can try and find ways to do it, but they're just not comparable to the actual experience of bowling. So there's and then of course, you know, gathering outside the home at a special event, you know, there's something really special about that. There's something really kind of party and festive like about that. You know, everybody loves to go out to eat, everybody loves to go hang out at a bar, but then to be able to actually do something together and achieve something together, that's when you know, outings can, it's like each outing's a little adventure that you did as a team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think
imagine trying to recreate bowling in the home. You know, the weird shoes, the heavy ball, you know, I mean, that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's even more than that. Like when I go to the bowling alley, I don't really want it to be at home. I want to go through like that weird process of having the person find my shoes that don't fit very well, and I got to hobble around over to go put them on and walk over, and I got to wait, you know, because I'm sharing a lane. Like that's kind of
A lot
part
of
of the
character.
experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think there's like, you know, you can look at the product as bowling, and in that case, you're right, Jesse. Like unless you're fabulously wealthy, you're not going to be bowling at home. Well, I guess you're wealthy or very foolish. But I think, you know, the interesting example to me is the bar. If you think of like beer or your mixed drink as the product, well, yeah, you can definitely get them both at home.
For way
But
cheaper, by the way.
yeah, much, much cheaper. But if I can go with a bunch of my friends for their birthday, and I go to Two-Bit and I have a robotic bartender make this thing for me, like the product is now the experience. It's not the drink. Like the drink is an ancillary part of it. It's tangential. Like we're now looking at the whole experience. And to me, like that's a lot of more, that's what location based is. Like you just have to kind of reimagine what the product is in that sense.
You know, I'd even throw out that there's some functional advantages, right? To your birthday example, you know, maybe you don't want to have to clean up after your friends the next night. You know, you have a lot of fragile art in your home, and you don't want to have them all over there. They're going to be reckless and break shit. You know, it's like each of these things, you know, has you know, some cascading effects.
I will say that as a English Premier League fan, there is nothing better but being surrounded by 70 people all cheering for Chelsea, and we're all saying all the different songs and phrases and chants, and and so no, you're totally right. Like being in the moment, and I think that could transcend both physically and virtually whenever you gather those group of people together with a similar characteristic. It can still be a very powerful thing.
Dwayne, I'm so happy you mentioned that, because you know the shared ritual is, I think, some of what, frankly, in the middle of a pandemic, everybody's going nuts, right? You know, trying to do a birthday party over Zoom is not the same, you know, and you know, but what, you know, the shared ritual of singing happy birthday to each other, and you know, being able to literally do cheers, take shots, you know, whatever your rituals are, you know. And I think that you know, oftentimes the football culture, as in soccer, and the British pub culture, you know, Irish, you know, sing-alongs, that is, you know, singing together literally releases endorphins and makes you happy. You know, there's raw science there, and that is a you know, I think more opportunity for shared ritual is would only be a good thing.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful thing. Cool. So, do each of you have a particular location-based experience that you enjoy the most? Do you have a favorite? It could be digital or non-digital, and we'll go deeper into the theory of LBE. But I want to put this out beforehand. What do you guys like to do? Like, what's your favorite LBE?
Oh man, I'm so curious what you guys have to say. You guys go first.
I'll give you a way throwback. I know one that was really influential to me when I was a kid. I lived in New Jersey, and there was this insane amusement park called Action Park that we used to go to. And it had just so many weird things. I mean, not only did it have like a bunch of actually dangerous rides, they had rides there you needed to have a driver's license in order to like get in the vehicle. It was crazy.
I
But
can't
then
believe you went to Action Park, dude. You know that's a Netflix special now, right?
I've wanted to watch it. I haven't watched it yet.
Class Action Park, for those which I just love the name because there were so many lawsuits around it.
Yeah, when we were kids, people called it Traction Park. That was
oh my god.
Because I remember the one that really stung me when I was I remember waiting in line on some water slide or something where you swing on a vine and fall in the water, because like half of it was a water park and half of it wasn't. And I remember waiting in line, and I look over and I see this other water slide that's closed. And I'm looking at it, and it goes down like at a 45-degree angle, like a long way. And then at the bottom, there's a loop. And I remember just looking at it like, that's just not right. There's just nothing right about a loop in a water slide.
So dangerous.
But the one that I remembered was they had basically a large tennis court, and they had all these tanks, these little miniature tanks they'd made. You'd climb inside, shut the door, you're in this tank, and inside the tank was a bucket of tennis balls, and you would put them into a cannon and you could fire them at the other tank. So you had 2 joysticks to steer the tank around, and then you could fire this cannon, and there were targets on the other tanks. And if you hit a target, the tanks would spin around. And this just was, then not only that, but then around the edge of this whole tennis court, there were all these coin-operated tennis ball machines. And you could go put a coin in, and you could fire tennis balls from the side at any tank you wanted.
Oh my God.
It was crazy. And what I loved about it was this sort of mixture of, it was a ride and it was a game at the same time. And that one was very influential for me.
LBE envy is what that is right there. That is awesome.
Boy, I don't even know how to go after that, Jessie, because that sounds like way too much fun.
Wicked.
Like way too much fun. But I'd say broadly to your question, Dwayne, in terms of a non-digital experience, one thing I've always loved, out by me in the mountains in Los Angeles, a place called Big Bear, they have an alpine slide, which I guess you would call like a kind of like a luge. You sit on a little sled and you can just, we'll probably go way too fast down this thing that's probably safe, but it's very exciting. And that's really something that outside of like one time in Europe, I've never been able to like mimic anywhere else. Being able to just go through the mountains and fly through the trees on this little tiny luge that feels incredibly unsafe. And it really gets the adrenaline pumping. For a digital experience, and I'll tie this into VR, into kind of my little world, there's a lot of different types of VR experiences for LBE. And I think one that absolutely nailed it and knocked it out the park was the Beat Saber collaboration with vArsenal, and having a real, towards like what any FEC operator would dream for, like basically an attendant free or attendant light, depending how you're doing, just walk up, the machine services the customer. It's a very easy experience, point of sale, play, safety, hygiene, the whole 9 yards, all taken care of.
Fun to watch too. You've got
and it's gorgeous. Yeah. And it's great for the player. It's great for someone who's just watching. It's great for passersby to say, ooh, what's that? Maybe I want to do that too. It's just an all-around great experience.
They even had those retinal persistent fans. Yeah. From far away. We've got one of those holograms, and just absolutely love it. It really, it crushes it.
Okay.
Have you guys done much immersive theater? As a category, that has really, been fascinating to me lately.
I've studied a lot, but I haven't really. I've been to a couple experiences like that, but certainly not some of the newer ones.
Well, it's one of those places that, depending on how you look at it, it's either been around for a long time as site-specific theater and whatever. But I think that it feels like we've really turned a corner, and the availability is just everywhere. And one of the ones that I just loved was in downtown Los Angeles called Hopscotch. And you buy your tickets and, show up at noon on Sunday to this random street corner in the middle of downtown. So you're on the street corner and you're looking around, and some other people are there looking around, and all of a sudden a limo pulls up and you get in, and they're like, get in. So you get in this limo, and thus starts this immersive opera. that took place like in these, you know, your limo went for, you know, there's performers in the front of the limo, and there was, you know, cameras in the room, and you're like, what are these cameras for? And then you get dropped off at a warehouse. You go into the warehouse, there'd be another performance in there, and then you're back in a limo going somewhere else. By the time we were done with this thing, you'd been in Chinatown and the Bradbury Building and all these like cool spots. But the thing that was so interesting was all of those cameras were live streaming back to this sort of center camp in a parking lot in the middle of the Arts District. And anybody who wanted to could come and watch this opera unfold in this center camp. And so you, as the ticket holder, sort of became this third role, right? You were like, because whenever you got out of the limo, you were given a GoPro, and now you know, if the four of us were doing it together, it'd be, okay, Dwayne, you're gonna be the cameraman, Michael, you're directing, you know, Jessie and Brent, you guys make sure to capture all the action, right? And so now we're all working together as the audience to make sure that we're capturing this event that's then going back for this, you know, sort of third role in the show. I always thought that was fascinating as a, you know, as a model. You know, sort of like the idea of the live, you know, there's the live studio audience in a game show, there's the people on stage, and then there's the audience, the broadcast audience. You know, each one of those is a different sort of character in this unfolding narrative.
That's cool.
Yeah. So before we switch gears, we do have another question by Kat. Thank you, Kat. And it says, when creating an LBE, so location-based experience, or location-based, yeah, we'll say location-based experience, what does the concepting process and milestones look like? Are you given parameters to work against? So like what type of restrictions, and how has the process changed as technology advances? So let's take the first one. So when creating an LBE, what does the concepting process and milestones look like? So who would like to take that first?
I'm curious to hear what Brent has to say, because you guys have done so many weird things.
Me too.
Well, one thing I appreciate that. One thing that you know, I would urge people to do just in the creative phase is do it multiplayer. You know, the multiplayer stuff, the social stuff, people will prioritize all day long. We sell out of the multiplayer before the single player all day long. And I think that goes back to some of our earlier thoughts around sort of why LBE. Most often you're there on a date, you're there with friends, you're there to connect with them, you know, and so this location-based experience is sort of a fun way to do it. And so even VR, which you'd think is arguably not social, you put on the headset, but if I got an audio track to the four of you and we're all killing zombies together at the same time, that's really cool. You know, hey, Jessie, I got your back. Michael, duck, you know, or whatever, right? You know, and even just your movements, I know that it's, you know, that I can look and see that it's you, your mannerisms or whatnot. And so I think definitely go in a social direction, because there's not a lot of it. There's not a lot of great content, and, you know, it's super appealing.
That's really great advice, I think. I mean, even we were seeing the same thing back in our Disney Quest days, because Disney Quest was a little special because it was very much designed for family groups. It certainly could support other kinds of social groups, but it was, and that's a tough challenge. How do you make a multiplayer game experience that the whole family plays together and the whole family enjoys? And we were always thinking about that. And VR was so we did a lot of things that were cave based back in the day, where you put in a room with 3D screens all around you to create, so that way your whole group could be in there doing it together. But some of the stuff we did was VR, and one of them was the Aladdin's Magic Carpet adventure. And we'd done 3 different versions of that. The first version was just a test at Epcot Center. The second one was a test at Disneyland, but it was a much bigger world. But both of those were really single player experiences. But when we did the Disney Quest version, we wanted to make it multiplayer, and which led to a weird challenge. Suddenly you had 4 people collaboratively in 4 flying carpets. And we're like, oh, you can't all be Aladdin. And so how the heck is this going to work? And we ended up making 4 different monkeys, because, Abu the monkey from Aladdin. And we just gave them different colored outfits. And I remember the really magic moment when we first hooked it all up. And I was in there on my carpet, and I looked over, and there's another monkey sitting on their carpet, and the monkey's head like turns over to look at me, and it was just kind of like, oh man, there can be something really magic about that. But yeah, starting social it is really crucial, because that's why people are there. Single player stuff that's innately single player is more of a challenge. Michael, I'd really love to hear your thoughts about the single versus multiplayer in the VR space. I hear a lot of anecdotes about that. What really works in multiplayer in LBE, the multiplayer, I hear a lot of people say that really carries the bulk of the revenue. Do you find the same thing?
Yeah, that's true. But I think that the caveat is, there's a perception that multiplayer drives like 90%, and it's a lot closer to maybe 55, 60.
Okay.
Multiplayer certainly is the lion's share. And from what, just from my time at Servios as well as Springboard, I would say it follows the same kind of online multiplayer, where you're saying more multiplayer is done cooperatively than PvP. But single player is still, it's still a big driver. I mean, in LBE before Beat Saber left, that was still one of the top played games. Job Simulator is still a very top played game. So there's a lot of desire in the single player world, but I think towards, what Brent was saying, multiplayer will sell out first. Multiplayer is what people end up coming to play. They might be willing to settle for a single player experience. But it certainly drives a lion's share. And I think to kind of go back to the original question from that, like, how are you making these location-based experiences? From the content side, you do have to think about that up front. You have to think, am I trying to make something multiplayer? But am I going to scope this out to also be a single player if there aren't more than one person there at a given time?
Great.
And like, that's a very hard design decision. And I know, because I went through this 6 separate times at Servios, and I was the kind of de facto product manager for the LBE SKUs. So I got a lot of flack for a lot of this, but I will say that, that's a very difficult part. The other piece is really focusing on accessibility, because single player or multiplayer doesn't really matter if you can't figure out how to get into it. For instance, the Witcher series is probably my favorite game series of all time. But if someone asked me to get into that and fall in love with it in 2 minutes, it just simply wouldn't happen. Wow. So when you're looking at something like a location-based experience, you say, how do I scope this out? How do I make it? Accessibility is paramount. That's the first step before single or multiplayer.
So true. And God, you just so nailed it. When you're at home, you really are a different person, right? You're relaxed on your couch. You are not, you maybe don't have anybody around. You can take the time to learn something. In public, you literally have to be, and literally I'm in the rental business. So I really want to get you through and having had a good time, and not have there be a lot of downtime having to do the learning. So you nailed it, that accessibility and sort of quick onboarding is really important in LBE. Oh, yeah. One other thing quick I wanted to throw out about multiplayer in public that I just love, and there's so little of, is asymmetric multiplayer. So this is like, I expect you, keep talking and nobody explodes, where you've got one person in VR, is trying to disarm the bomb, and the rest of us have the printed manual for the bomb as we all try to work together. Akron, Attack of the Squirrels is another one. A ton of fun, right? I'm in VR as the evil tree, and everybody else on their phones as the squirrels trying to steal from you. And so, those are neat. And this, Jessie, you nailed this with your tank sim, right? Around the side were the people who had the guns, but no tank. And I think that's a space that there's room for, more of, and and it's really compelling.
Yeah, we actually did one of those for the Smithsonian Institution. They had been interested in a VR experience involving dinosaurs that they wanted to do in the museum. But one of the things that we found in talking to families about it and talking to the museum was, families are very nervous about, I'm going to bring my child here and I'm going to put them on a headset. They're going to see things I can't see. Wow. And if I put on a headset, like I can't see my kid right now in this crazy, noisy museum. And so we stared at it and said, I think the only way to go is going to be asymmetric.
Wow.
So we made this thing called Deep Time Detectives, which it's a bit like Keep Talking, Nobody Explodes. The idea is the person in the headset, they can manipulate these different fossils and the people outside, they have information about the fossils, and together they have to talk and like get the fossils properly classified, figure out what animal is this, and then it ends with a nice capper of the animal you've identified. Now it kind of comes to life, and now you get to actually experience it in VR, and it worked. It was interesting to me, like asymmetric is fun just to do because it facilitates a lot of communication. But it's interesting how that actually, it's a pretty solid way to do education too, because everybody's looking, thinking, solving problems, showing each other.
Collaborating.
Yeah, and it lends itself to kind of rich, deep information that a lot of kind of game experiences wouldn't. So I definitely agree that asymmetric has a lot of potential benefits, and I continue to wonder where that's going to go going forward, both like just for experiences that are designed that way, and then the bigger question of asymmetric large experiences, right? Like if you know, right now everybody's big on cross-platform. We can all cross-platform it up with Fortnite no matter what platform we're on. Can you get VR in there too? We don't have a lot of PC VR cross-platform. There's some,
right?
There's some, but it's going to be very interesting to see if there's more of that over time.
You know, I've been playing around with Spatial a lot lately, and they have a build of being able to use it on your phone and on your iPad. So I was there in the headset and, you know, had the full use with my hands, but then on your mobile, it was pretty compelling how much you could navigate around the space. It really felt to me like I had a window into the space with one and I was really in the space with the other. They feel like they're getting close with cross-platform. Yeah.
Cool. So I guess I think we covered all of those, because going into cross-platform and how VR could be a part of it kind of address that last question of how has the process changed as technology advances. I think that it feels like that question is still trying to be answered, right? That's still a challenge with how you can get multiple platforms, and as more technology comes in. But Jesse, you have something to say?
Oh yeah, I know one thing I'll say with that is one of the big challenges that everybody has when they're trying to figure out how to mix digital and location based is longevity. Because if you rely too heavily on just the novelty of the technology itself and the newness of the technology itself, it puts you in a tough spot, because 2 years later, when that technology is not new anymore, now you're kind of like, what are you going to refresh it with? Are you going to do that same investment all over again for new technology? I watched this happen with the Virtual World group back in the 90s. They had a chain of maybe, I don't know, 7, 10, something like that. They had about 10 locations, and it was kind of a battle tech thing. You'd get into this big pod, and you'd you know, it was networked, it was multiplayer. It did so much right. It kind of followed the bowling alley model, because you could go and do it for a party, and that was super fun. There were people who did league play. I mean, it was pretty much an esport, really. And so it was doing pretty well. And even though it had a really cool pod, you got in this pod with this big joystick, and it had like 4 screens that you would kind of see into your world and multiplayer. After a few years, they were using just PC hardware in it. And after maybe 2-3 years, it started to get a little stale, because new graphics cards were coming along that were so much better. And when they go to the new graphics card, they had to write a whole new game again, and write and build and test the whole game. And so that's a challenge, definitely. And so the ones that I see that use digital that work well are ones where there is something really special about the props that kind of make it work. Like when some of the stuff at Disney Quest was still getting, you know, after 20 years, it was still getting lines on the last day that place was open. And not because people are excited to play on a 20-year-old computer, but because the physical affordances that you could have into a game were just not, it was the only way to do that.
The pirate ship adventure, that was one of the caves, and you were sitting there with your gun, and the tech didn't matter. You know, I mean, it falls into the background. It really was about working with your fellow pirates to, you know, save the world.
So when I look at places like the Void, that's like, I sat around when they started announcing what they were doing. I started doing arithmetic and thinking, ooh, I mean, this is a good business if you can make it work. And I was kind of staring at it. And I'm like, man, they got to make so many new experiences. It works if you got enough places, if you got enough locations. I think it pencils out. But if you don't, you've got trouble. And this was the Disney Quest problem. Disney Quest was supposed to have 15 locations. I think it would have broken even at 8 locations or something like that as a worldwide endeavor. But they decided, yeah, let's just keep it as a theme park thing. And actually, I just might talk about why real quick is an interesting location-based note. We opened the first one in Florida, and it did great. People were nuts for it, and it did great all summer, and it did great for into the season, which made sense. It was at Disney. If it couldn't work at Disney World, it's not gonna work anywhere. So then the next one was, let's try Chicago, because Chicago's a tough town because it's got weather and seasons and things. And if we can make Chicago work, we can probably make Paris work and a lot of places work. So we did Chicago, and Chicago was great all summer. People were mobbing the place. It was on Michigan Avenue, very expensive piece of real estate. And then winter comes, and it's like Wednesday in February. Kids are in school, and it's wintertime, and nobody was coming. And
despite it being cold outside, they were just going from school back to home. And
it's because the tourist cycle there, like the tour, it could, like, because it was the way it was set up, it was dependent on tourists. And the real killer was when we would go to management when we were working on the attractions, and we'd say, look, we got a conflict. We can either focus on making this an incredible first time experience, or we can take some of that energy away and put it into the power of replayability. And their answer always was, first time. We got to make this bam. It's got to be a wow. It's got to be a pow. You got to get it the first time. And if it gets a little repeatable, what was in their mind was, this is for tourists. They may not come back, or if they come back, it's gonna be at least a year. So it's okay if it doesn't change. That was their mindset. And we're like, okay, if that's where we're going for, that's what we're going for. And so we designed away from replayability. And in retrospect, I think everybody looked back and said that was probably a mistake, because when you look at what makes bowling work, part of what makes it work is the leagues. People are there, like, either every Saturday with their league and maybe a couple times a week to practice.
And
that's
usually
like
off nights.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's like a third of the revenue of bowling alleys is these small number of regulars. And there was nothing like that. There was no kind of competitive repeating thing. And so finding that balance of, I'm only coming there one time ever, I'm coming there now and then I'm like a regular. Finding that balance seems to be really key for persistent LBE, I think.
I think that was really beautiful and such the nut of this stuff. And back to some of what we were talking about accessibility, and there's only so much complexity if in that first moment. And Jonathan Cassone said something that really resonated with me, which was, you're sort of, it's either storytelling or skill building. And the skill building side is really interesting, right? A bowling alley, you're skill building, and you can go back there 100 times because you're getting better. You go back to a movie theater and you go to the same movie theater, but you're going to be watching a different movie. Odds are you're not seeing the same movie over and over and over again. And I think as we think about that with, what you were talking about, Jessie, games, the replayability, is this something you can really optimize? It's maybe not, requiring hours and hours of new story content, but a single game being able to provide hours and hours of ongoing entertainment, as you get better at it.
Yeah, I like the idea of a skill building movie. And as I was thinking about that, I realized, Rocky Horror Picture Show. That was totally a skill building movie, because you have to learn what to say, what to do when, as part of the audience.
But
there's not very many of those.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
that is true. So I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Michael?
Oh no, yeah, I'm okay. I don't want to take us too far off course here.
No, go for it.
Sure. It's really interesting. And I love the way that you kind of put it, like a skill building thing. Because I think even in VR, even when you're playing a game you've played before, there is certainly that ability to get better at it. And then when you're bringing your friends to get, maybe you weren't able to beat them the last 3 times, but you're going to go this weekend again, because this time you're going to beat them in Arizona Sunshine. You're going to do it. You're going to be on the winning team in Smashbox Arena. You're just got to make it happen. And that's a really critical piece. And, from kind of watching hundreds of arcades over the years, what I would say really comes down, it really breaks down the successful ones from the okay ones are the people who focus. Which customer group do you want? And it's an interesting question you propose to management, Jessie. Like, do we want a great first time experience? Do we want a great repeat experience? I think you can argue either is important and either is workable, as long as you've like really, really owned one of them. Because there are some that are tourists, some VR arcades that are very tourist based, that are on the boardwalk, and they absolutely crush it. And they have about 5% return business. It's possible. There's also some like, Control V, for instance, which runs an incredibly high return rate. And they have a really, really big birthday party scene. But if you ask, like, how does someone come there to go there for a birthday? You only get one a year. They also go there when they have a good report card. They also go there for their friend's birthday. And they create this environment where it's sure the first time experience is good, but it's about how do I get them to come back here at least once a month, every other weekend. And I think the long story short of that is you really have got to decide what you want and who you want and really own that, because both of those options work. It's the kind of middle ground of like, well, maybe it's a good first experience and hopefully they want to come back. And that's where you start to fall apart.
This was a huge topic for us before we opened 2-Bit. And, we ended up, in downtown Los Angeles, right? The Arts District is not exactly a high traffic area. And we landed at really wanting locals and repeat business. And the idea was, let's put it, in downtown LA. It's not, and not, directly go after tourists, because if we can prove it, that people will come to this place from far away and nearby, then, there's how many tourist cities in America? I don't know, 5 or 10 or something like that. But there's hundreds of not tourist cities, right? Where if you could crack the local, you could create a concept that you could put in 100 cities. And for us, that was a huge focus. And we had the opportunity to go into Las Vegas really early and turned it down, and part of that was because it would really be a different product. And what you would do to appeal to those tourists and whatnot, right as we were trying to finalize our product for a locals thing, would have been a distraction. And and you can see it in even Topgolf, right? Topgolf, which had incredibly merged with Callaway today, but they've got 50 locations across the country that all look the same, except for the one in Vegas, which has pools and a freaking multi-lane for something and all sorts of other stuff, right? It's the super Topgolf, as they do what Vegas does to things. So I think I really love this topic.
Hey, speaking of what Vegas does to things, I'm curious if anyone's got thoughts on Meow Wolf.
So awesome. I love Meow Wolf. And I went and checked out Area 15. Meow Wolf wasn't open yet. It should be early next year, but the whole theme of this one that they're putting in Area 15 around it being this sort of weird supermarket is so fun. And I can't wait to see what they do with that.
So for the viewership, can we describe Meow Wolf and what it's all about?
Have you guys been to the one in Albuquerque?
I have. I've watched videos. I have not been there.
You will love it. I mean, it's imagine, some like one part museum, one part, immersive art experience, one part, choose your own adventure, because you arrive and you're at this facade of a building, of a Victorian house. And as you get into the house, you're wandering around, and this is like a weird house. There's something, you can actually crawl into the fireplace. And when you're on the other side of the fireplace, there's mammoth bones. And, as you sort of wander around this place, there's just so much weird. And rather than, an art gallery where there's a nice painting on the wall in a frame and, a little table and another place with another frame, the art is everywhere, and it's in your face and it's in weird places. And it's a very special, kind of art cooperative.
Yeah.
Interesting. So whenever we're talking about interesting spaces and trying to figure out like the right experiences for some, we will get back to Miss Maxima's question that was earlier in the stream, but I think it's relevant now before we do our other pivot, that it's not new to associate virtual reality with fitness or socialization experiences or physical rehabilitation. Could the infrastructure that you mentioned of building a location-based entertainment, venue or location-based experience. Could it be the same for a VR clinic or a VR gym? So I
Yes.
think, oh, who said
Michael, I'm
yes?
so curious. Michael, you have to take this first. I'm so
Go for
curious
it.
what you think.
Yeah, so I'm really happy to see that VR for fitness has taken off more recently. You look at companies like YUR, or even what Oculus is doing, or gyms like Black Box, which started out of Idaho and now has one in San Francisco. It's always been really, really interesting to me. When Servios launched Sprint Vector, which was a kind of like a racing platformer game where you had to really locomote your arms heavy to move around the map. We had a lot of customers who wrote into us and said, hey, like, I've been playing this game for 3 months now and I've lost 40 pounds. And it's really inspiring to kind of see how people use your products in a way you never really thought. And at the same time, we started to see arcades that were, let's be real, they weren't pivoting to being gyms, but they certainly were doing a very smart thing where if you took your weekday hours where you're just not getting a lot of traffic, they would kind of open up these little like fitness classes, like come by for an hour and play Beat Saber. And it's different pricing structure, but the whole objective was like, how do we actually get exercise out of that? And then, you kind of look at things like that. Black Box VR was an actual real gym where they had, a kind of cable cross machine with content made specifically for it, where you could now start to actually lift, but not in a crummy gym environment. Like you're in a whole separate world and you're doing crazy stuff. And it was a whole new experience, but in a location-based setting, which was really interesting. And it's unfortunate a lot of that kind of launch came close to within the COVID timing. But there are institutes that are out there that are studying a lot of this thing, doing metabolic testing for different games. And it's certainly there's a lot of validity behind VR for fitness.
There was a European study that said you would actually work out harder in
Yeah.
VR than you would in real life. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
like 10 or 20% harder, longer. You were sort of less aware of your own pain, I guess. But that is really fascinating. I got to say, I just happened to buy a Peloton weeks before the lockdown, and I'm obsessed with it. And frankly, the gamification on it is minimal at a best. I mean, if there was a little bit of a better game layer there, I would do it all the time. And you can really see that, that work. But I would just love to see the gaming side of that be more compelling, because it even just a light layer, and I want to do it a lot.
I know one of the things I keep thinking about is the potential crossover of esports and VR. Because while esports have a lot of popularity, one of the things that always feels a little weird to me about them is just like you're just watching the screen, right? Because the players are just sitting there. There's nothing to watch. And the idea of a video game where some level of actual athleticism matters, I think has the potential to be kind of a more powerful spectator sport experience.
Yeah.
And so I think about that a lot. And the other one I keep thinking about is the question of, can we have an LBE esport crossover? Because that hasn't really happened yet. I keep wondering about, can there be an esport where, playing it at home is great, but if you go to the center, that's when it's killer, right? So when I think about that, I don't think that wants to be a game that somebody spun up out of nothing.
Right.
I feel like that wants to kind of draft on some existing game. Like, it if somehow you could have a Fortnite, and if you went to the LBE, the Fortnite was like 10 times better.
Yeah.
And since Fortnite's so socially important to people, you'd get into this really interesting place and space. But I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and you could imagine that, so often LBE gets, some of the earlier tech, because you can put expensive, you can spread the cost of those expensive technologies across lots of players. And so you could imagine that what you're talking about, the hyper immersive version of Fortnite, comes first to your local LBE, because that's where it's going to have the haptic suit and the exoskeleton and all the things that are going to be 10 grand before they minimize it. But I love where your head's at, because I think that's a good fit.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening right now, like in the middle of this, well, hopefully the middle, like, go towards the end of the pandemic in the US, maybe, who knows? But before we go post-pandemic, I did want to mention what Two-Bit Circus was doing. And I think you mentioned it maybe before we went live about your remote option that Two-Bit Circus is doing. So Mac, before Brent talks about it, Mac, if you could play the video of the Two-Bit Circus, their remote game show, that would be great. Cool. So, Brent, what made your team decide to move forward with the remote game show? And we talked about very early on in the conversation. Do you think that this is a digital aspect to the physical that you're going to continue to offer?
Yeah, we started building this really because we're workaholics and we were going freaking nuts being locked down. But inside of our amusement park, we have that Club 01, which is a 100-seat interactive theater with touchscreens on all the tables. And so for years, we've been experimenting with what, kind of interactive shows look like, where you're not just watching the shows, you're part of the shows. And so those touchscreens would allow us to do a big bracketed competition. And then, ta-da, Jessie and Michael, you guys come on stage and you're going to be our next contestants. And so instantly what we did is we started pushing that out online. So it's a live hosted show where, if you imagine the browser broken into quadrants, there's the live host, the chat, together with a game show bot who's sort of probing you in the chat, a leaderboard, and then the area that's swapping out all the challenges. And so it's kind of a variety game show with all sorts of different mechanics that look like game shows you've seen over the years, but you get to be part of the show. And then, people at the top of the leaderboard, we invite you on the live stream to be, panelists in special games. So it's definitely been a lot of fun, and for us, it was something that was always kind of on the list, the to-do list, and even post-pandemic, we'll continue to offer it, and because you'll be able to come live and do the shows in the room or play from home over the web.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So along with that, we see what Two-Bit Circus is doing. Michael, for the beginning of the pandemic for Springboard VR, a lot of your operators couldn't operate, but so as they've been able to reopen, how have some weathered the storm? Or I know I talked to one of your team members that talked about how some of them are actually at the levels that they were pre-pandemic already. And so, how have they been able to get to that point?
Yeah, and some are actually doing better, year over year than they were last year. And I don't want to make it sound like that's everyone. This has been very, very hard on our customers and on LBE in general. But I will say, look, it's very regional. Some places were allowed to stay open. Some places were ordered to shut down and are still shut down. So, it's not necessarily anyone's fault, depending how they come through this. But what I've seen, and I think that this holds true without COVID in general, is that the people who have seen a lot of success since COVID started are the people who have really understood their value prop, they've lived by it, and they've continued to communicate it, and they haven't really pivoted. And I say that with a little hesitancy, because I don't want anyone to get the impression that you shouldn't be focusing on safety, or you shouldn't be focusing on, how to change up your operations now. Change is inherently a good thing. But what I think a lot of people miss, and especially from the customers that we have on the very high end side, the ones who are doing very well versus the okay ones, is that people who are always looking for the next, the newest thing to do, the new thing to pivot to, they're never focused on what worked originally. They're never focused on why they got into LBE or into VR to begin with. And the people who have made it are the people who have reminded their customers that even before COVID, they were the safest place in town. You're talking about arcades that have 10 by 10 booths, social distancing before it was cool. You're talking about places who have used sanitary wipes and even UVC boxes before anyone knew what they were. Like, these were a lot of, for many businesses, these were standard protocols since 2016. And these places have been very safe long before COVID and during COVID. So instead of pivoting to say, hey, look at all these new safety products we got, it's more of, we're still that amazing venue you've always loved. We're still bringing you experiences you can't get at home. Oh, and just, by the way, don't forget, we're still super safe and probably safer than anywhere else you're going right now. And it's really that kind of core, remembering why you got here, sticking with that, and really owning who you are and why you got into this business and what you bring that other people's don't. And I hope that doesn't sound, too like a football coach, at a kind of halfway through the game. But I mean it like it's really that kind of like inspirational versus tactical. Like, you need to remember why you're here and keep focusing on that messaging to your customers.
Yeah, I like that because it's kind of like they double down on what they're good at, right?
Yeah.
And they've been doing that for a long time, so it makes sense that for like you said, there's a spectrum, but for those who are doing very, very well, they've been doing that for a while now, and now they're just being recognized at that whenever things get a little bit tough.
Yeah, and I think that there's really going to be some re-education that needs to happen, to get a certain category of customer, sort of comfortable again with going out in public, and hey, all those protocols that were already in place, just sort of re-educating people to say, hey, listen, fomites aren't a thing, air replacement rates, are more than sufficient inside of our buildings. Each of these different things that are going to, frankly, take folks really understanding what it is they're getting into, or at least enough messaging to put people's fears at ease.
Very cool. So yeah, let's try to wrap some of these things up. So Jessie, I'll start with you. So we're going to go towards a post-pandemic now. What do you think some or the location-based entertainment? What are some things that could look different post-pandemic, in your opinion, if anything?
Oh wow! I mean, it's I'm going to draft off what Brent was saying. I'm fascinated by the idea of hybrid, because I think workplaces are probably going to be different post-pandemic because the whole world has been forced to kind of push on work from home as much as possible, and so that's becoming a much more normal way for people to connect and interact. And the idea of kind of play from home, that same hybrid concept that talking about that's definitely opened my mind a little bit. I think there's really something there. But then at the same time, part of what I think about is not just what does it mean that the pandemic's over, but by the time the pandemic's over, I mean, who knows exactly when that is? I don't know. But technology will have moved down the road a little bit. And I do feel like tracking over wide areas is going to be, right now the Void has a technology that does it. Some other people have experimented with it, but I think that's going to start to become a really common technology. And you combine that with augmented reality, because one of the things I like to say is augmented reality is best when it augments reality. And to be able to have physical spaces and places that are designed for augmented reality, I think that could end up being very special. So that combination of things together, I don't know. Those are some of the things I know I'm looking forward to.
Well, you imagine a bunch of people at home in VR headsets, a bunch of people in LBE with AR headsets in two spaces that are sort of, roughly the same size. You could have them interacting with each other. You know, the AR people can
Mhm.
see the VR, you know, avatars, and the avatars can see the, you know, the people in VR can see the avatars of the AR. That gets really cool. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. So let's see, for each one of you, if there was somebody jumping into the LBE business post pandemic, what one piece of advice would you give them? And I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it. Michael, I'm going to start with you. And so, what you got?
I think this will be a lot like the little halftime football speech I just gave, but really focus on the value prop that you want to give to your customer. You know, we saw a lot of people get into this field early on, 2016, 17, 18, kind of under this guise of, you know, VR is cool and I want to facilitate bringing that to people, but it needs to be more in depth than that. You have to really make sure you've got a strong business plan, you really know what you want to do, you have the right partners, and I think most importantly, you're willing to go through the meat grinder for a bit to get there. It's not easy. You're not looking at the most profitable industry on earth, but if you got the heart, you got the mind to do this, and you got the right people and the right, you know, right vision, you can make this happen. It all starts with the fundamentals.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I would say it's a really special, you know, with the launch of the Quest 2, it's a really special time for VR, right? We finally sort of have a really accessible device that's super easy to use. It's an accessible price. You know, I'm dying to know, Michael, what you guys have been doing with education. You know, I feel like there's so many different zones for this that, you know, somebody building an experience could think, you know, could build for LBE, but have a little bit of a path into the home, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the Quest is sort of at a special place in, you know, in time right now. The other one that I found just as a consumer is my loyalty is increasing to places that are doing it safely. You know, I've gone back to restaurants multiple times post pandemic, you know, since the pandemic, that in a way where normally as a consumer, I want to always try something new, try something different. And I think it's a little bit of a vote to Jessie, what you were talking about of, you know, experiences that you really can spend time in and, you know, be a repeat customer of. I could see myself joining a league now in a way that maybe I wouldn't have pre-pandemic, you know, being sort of like I think that as the transaction cost of engaging live with humans goes up, you know, the you know, people are going to prioritize quality and things that they you know, and safety. So it's maybe a vote for repeatability.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know one thing that a phrase I've heard in the travel industry a little bit is revenge travel. The idea that when the pandemic's over, I'm gonna travel. I'm gonna go out there and touch and do everything. And so it's totally possible. Yeah, totally possible. At the end of the pandemic, people are ready for a lot of really novel, visceral experiences with other people. So that's that. I feel like there's an opportunity there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So then to wrap up, let's start with Brent, then Michael and Jessie. So where can people find out more information about what your companies are up to? If you have any exciting news about what your companies are up to, you're welcome to, here's your stage to do it.
All
Before
right. Well, hey, come. We run our game show, our Play From Home game show, live every Thursday, 7 o'clock Pacific. Tomorrow night is all Halloween themed. So we'd love to have you, you know, come and challenge, beat the game show bot. You can sign up at 2bitcircus.com. It's called Remote.
If you want to learn anything more about Springboard VR or what we do, you can always go to springboardvr.com. And just as well, if you'd like to learn about what we do, but also see a little bit more on the spicier memes side of it, on Twitter, you can find us at springboard_VR. Beautiful.
And I suppose people know they can go to schellgames.com and see what we're up to. Definitely our hot one this month is having Until You Fall out in 1.0. So if you want to do sword play in VR, either location based or at home, like it's feel free to check that out.
Well, and I gotta say a huge plug for I Expect You to Die, which is maybe my favorite VR title ever. It's so awesome, you guys. I was just ecstatic to join you on this because I'm such a fan. It's it should be people's first download.
It's so much fun.
It was a real labor of love. And talking about accessibility, we thought about that a lot there. We really thought about what we always said to ourselves was, we want this to be the VR experience you use to introduce your mom to VR.
Awesome.
So we wanted something easy to do, understandable, and not too overwhelming. And yeah, it's been a beautiful labor of love for us.
Oh, you guys nailed it. It's so good.
I know, Brent, whenever I think I met you in 2017 at a Games for Change. And I was talking about HoloLens Champions. I want to talk HoloLens Champions. And all you wanted to talk about was I Expect You to Die. It's like, I'm here to talk about a HoloLens Champions. I think it was Super at the time, actually.
Supercam, yeah, right, Supercam.
Yeah, and that was it. I was like, what? Why is this guy like? I want to talk about something different. But both experiences are fantastic. Both I Expect You to Die and Supercam's Predator. The phase 2 HoloLab Champions, its final product. So Brent, Michael, Jessie, thank you all so much for taking an hour plus of your time to talk about location-based entertainment. I enjoyed it very much to get your insight. For those watching, thank you so much. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Schell Games YouTube channel and make sure you enable your notifications so you see when our next videos are coming up. We put up game trailer videos, videos of our devs about what they're working on, and our dinner with the devs with our fantastic guests. Our next dinner with the devs is November 18th. We're going to do it a week before the Turkey Day holiday. So we're going to just be talking about game design. How do you approach it? What does game design mean? And we get a chance to talk with some of our fantastic game designers in the studio. So our live chat moderator, thank you, Adam. He put all of the links for 2-Bit Circus, for Springboard VR in the live chat. You can find Schell Games at schellgames.com, on our Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. You just search Schell Games, you'll find us. Well, we're all over the place, which is fantastic. Thank you again for watching. And Brent, Michael, Jessie, thank you again for attending. Please stay on the call until Matt calls us out. Thank you.
This was great. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.